Okay, hello everyone. I guess we'll start. And yeah, so welcome everyone on the quick presentation about crowdfunding, early access. My name is Marcin. I'm from Awaken Realms and GameFound. So there was a bit mistake on the intro, which showed that I'm from Qued Software, but I'm not. So sorry if that's a disappointment, but well. And today what I want to do with this presentation is show you our journey as a company from crowdfunding, how we utilize it, and how we kind of use it. And we also believe that it is one of the best way of developing and selling games. We started, I'll show you in a second how we started and where we are as a company, so our experience. But we did both board games and digital games in this model. So quick audience check, I wanted just to quickly see how many of you are working on the indie games. So if you could raise a hand on the indie games. All right, AAA games? No AAA games? Okay, we got one, that's cool. And who's wanted just to like start his own project, but he's not sure how to do it? All right, okay, cool. How many of you played Elden Ring? Good game. All right. So my crowdfunding experience starting with a board game. So we basically from nothing went into being one of the biggest board game publishers in the world. And this happened within a span of 4 years. So that's not a long time when you think of going from zero to selling 100,000 copies of Nemesis. So we used mostly Kickstarter for those projects. You probably know what Kickstarter is. So we got Tainted Grail, who gathered from 42,000 people, over £5 million. Nemesis Lockdown, Etherfields. ESS Vanguard is interesting because we had, this was a project that we started on our own platform, and I will talk a little bit about that as well. But as you can see, the numbers are quite big. They are not as profitable as digital games because you also have to produce those games, ship it. It's like physical goods, so it's a bit different. But still, it's fine. It's okay. The board gaming found their way into crowdfunding very strongly. They thought that the board games is a perfect synergy with the crowdfunding because the problem with physical goods is that you have a game and you have no idea how well it will sell, and you need to predict how many copies do you want to produce, right? The more copies you produce, the lower the price, but if you will not sell those games, then you have a bad stocks and basically you lose money. So it was always hard for like traditional board gaming industry to predict how much of a game we want to sell. And then crowdfunding comes in where it had a great promise, meaning that okay, so we have this idea about a game. This is the prototype. This is how the game will play. And now, if 1,000 people supports us, we'll make this game. If 10,000 people will support that, we'll give you for free 2 expansions because our cost per copy will go down because of the quantity and economy of scale and so forth. And basically, it ended up that as a crowdfunding client, you would have double the content for the same price later in retail. And we kind of made I think 14 projects on Kickstarter, and a lot of those games were cool. So after that, we started GameFound, and this is a dedicated platform for board game crowdfunding. We have over 730,000 users, currently 700 projects. Recently, we announced that Ravensburger, which is one of the biggest puzzles producer and board games in the world, invested in the platform, so it started to become more and more serious business. And we also are doing right now our games on our own crowdfunding platform, which is easy. And we also did early accesses on Steam. We did Tainted Grail Conquest that sold over 200 copies, 91% positive reviews, and No Place Like Home. Both of those were over a year in early access, where we developed those games, and then after those are released. And then we have a lot of upcoming early access, like Nemesis Distros, Nemesis Lockdown, Tainted Grail Fall of Avalon, and 2 other games that we still haven't announced. So we started going into digital games quite strong as well, and we're kind of using all our knowledge from the not only board games, meaning the gameplay and so forth, but also we're using that knowledge on how to interact with community, how to interpret feedback, and so forth. And basically, the reason that I wanted to show you is that we had a lot of experience with crowdfunding and early access, and basically this model, just to show you that I more or less know what I'm talking about. But biggest achievement, Nemesis, our board game, was on South Park 2 times, and Cartman even held it in his hand and said, "We'll play Nemesis," and that was, like. At that point, I was like, I don't care about Forbes cover anymore. This is the highlight of my life, and that's it. Yeah. Okay, so why do I think crowdfunding and games work so well together? Because that's the biggest thing, that whether you are in creative division or marketing division or business development, you don't really know what people want to play. No one does, because there's no magical formula or what is the good game is, right? The formula is, if the game is fun, it's fun. If it is not, it's not, and that's it. There's no magical equation that will say to you, oh, this is a good game and it will sell. And you can see all over the place in the creative industries, enormous fuck-ups of huge studios, both on digital games, movies. You got Disney, infinite amount of money, infinite amount to talent, to people who work on new Star Wars, and big flop, right? They didn't know what people expected. And it is even more true for digital games, because digital games are so much more complex, because we're not talking only about art, we're talking about gameplay. There's layers of technology, of creativity, story, involvement of the player. It's super complex, and it's hard to say. And so many games will fail based on the team that you will pick. How many, Angry Birds, right? There was a game before Angry Birds that was just not with fluffy birds, and it failed. And then they just reskinned it, and suddenly it was successful, right? And how many stories are there like that? That you have the wrong team, but good gameplay, or wrong marketing. There's so many different things that can go wrong. And if we compound to that making games, especially, any type of game, basically. I wanted to say indie games, but indie games are not cheap anymore. Those are usually teams of 8 to 10 people, and it can cost millions of zlotys a year, right? So if you want to commit to such an investment, it would be good to know, whether people actually want your game sooner than later. It sounds obvious, but it's not obvious to a lot of teams. And the biggest reason, I think, that we as creators, as indie creators, are fearing, there are like 2 big reasons why we don't want to show kind of unfinished projects. First, because most of people who work in game dev are gamers themselves, and they see, for example, Diablo 3 premiere and how the marketing is done. It is huge secret. No one knows about it, right? And then finally, a Twitter account makes like a blip, and everyone goes, yeah, the hype is unreal, everyone is excited, and the trailers go out. But that is when you are Blizzard, right? When we're sitting here, no one cares about our games. Like, no one cares. We care. But, well, maybe if there are people from CD Projekt or Techland, okay. People care about your games, but for most of us, we're not even on the radar, right? If we will copy this kind of strategy, nothing will happen. We'll make our big release trailer, and no one will care, right? And the second, so this is the one point, is that we're trying to copy strategies that AAA games are doing, because this is something that we experience as customers. The second point is that most of people I know, especially artists, are perfectionists. They don't want to show something that is not ready, that is unpolished, unfinished. And if you actually go into the definition of perfectionism, it's an actually psychological condition that you should treat, because it's not healthy, and it will block you in a lot of ways. But the cool thing about games and early access or crowdfunding is that we have one thing that almost no other industry have, and that means people actually want games, and they are excited about it. We're not selling toothpaste, like no one cares about toothpaste. We are selling something that people are really into. They want to fight a great game. They were waiting for this game for a long, long time. And there is actually something like an organic search on Steam. Like if you make, it actually happens. If you make a great game on Steam and will not market it, it can sell. It's almost like ask any other industry. It's almost impossible there, right? And the reason is because people are invested. This is something that they spend the time of the day with joy on it. And that's why, with all those things considered, I believe that crowdfunding and early access, giving people access to the game, is a perfect combination because of this excitement, because of engaging this community and building it. And now, not only you can actually, so the first point that I would say is one of the most important point is verifying our assumptions about what we are doing. Are people excited about it, right? Or what are the most things that are people excited about the game? Because one big risk that I can see in game creation, almost most important thing that, from my experience, it's not huge experience in terms of the digital games, but it is some experience, is defining the scope, right? If you'll overblown the scope, you'll end up with nothing usually, right? But if you'll cut it down in the most vicious, in the most vital places, then you'll end up with a game that people will not want to play. So the information for you is like, what is the, what is, for example, the marketing that interests people the most? What are the selling points that are actually unique? What is the theme that people like the most about your game? And if you will wait 3 years, develop your game in the basement, and then make a great grand announcement trailer, it's too late. The game is done. You spend your millions of dollars, zlotys, whatever it is, and you cannot take it back. But with early access, you actually have this chance to, show it, bounce it off community, make people play the game, which is also amazing. They will help you debug it. They will give you feedback. They will be excited about it. They will hate you sometimes if you, for example, unbalance it or whatever. But you can actually see the real impact of whatever you're doing. And there are other ways of doing that, sure, like focus groups and the corporations have those. But usually if we are indie developers, we don't have those. That's one point. And the second point, the most important vote is always a vote with a wallet, right? The often, people will say one thing, but they, for example, everyone hates Apple, right? But somehow Apple have a lot of profits. People are buying it, right? But if you would see on Twitter, it's one of the most hated company ever, or Microsoft or whatnot, right? So, it's very hard. Very often, it's very hard to see the real feedback because the feedback is not on words, but it's in the actions. And having the possibility to actually observe people playing, or seeing the data from the game where people actually stop playing, where they are most engaged, who is your target group, super valuable information, extremely valuable. And what are the problems with it? So this only works if you are prepared for a lot of iterations. And I have a saying, wrong or not, that developing a game is also iterational process. And why do we mean with it? And we started it even from the board games. Is that our biggest philosophy in the board games was, whenever you're making a gameplay, you cannot work on a nice-looking prototype. Your prototype needs to look as bad as possible. Why? Because you will be not emotionally connected to the work invested in layout, in art, so you can easily cut out the mechanics that doesn't work and put in the new ones, better ones, to kind of develop the game, move it forward. And whenever we developed board games, we literally had like boxes of cards that were just thrown out of the game because it didn't work. In digital world, it is a bit more complex because sometimes changing, one aspect of the game will cost you a lot of money. But we still believe that it is super important to be able to be flexible in the game development. And one thing that sadly I don't really see a big focus in our industry is gameplay. And I believe that gameplay is the key to successful game. It's even in the name, game, right? So it makes sense. But unfortunately, what I'm seeing a lot is like people producing tons of assets, tons of level design and so forth, and then trying to glue it somehow together into a working zombie of a game. Sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't, but I really don't think that the kind of waterfall approach in creating games where you would have a grand plan on this game from the get-go and then implement it and then it's done. Why it doesn't work mostly? Because going back to the what makes the game fun, sometimes you'll have an idea that would really sound amazingly on paper. You put it into the game and it just doesn't work. It's boring. It don't bring you fun, and then you just need to cut it out, and that's it. There's no different. There's no other way around it. So you need to be prepared for that if you're going early access, because there are a lot of games that are coming into early access as a more or less finished product, but saying there might be bugs, right? But this is not what early access, in my idea, is for. The early access is to actually being open to feedback, being open to modifying the even core loop, balancing the game hard, and so forth. The positive thing, as I said, it can help you cut your losses much earlier, which is vital. Sometimes if you spend too much time on developing a game, it will just kill your studio. If you overscope a game, it will kill your studio. The costs of making games are super big, so as I said. But the other side of the coin is, if you see the potential in the game, and if you see the sales, or interest, it doesn't even have to be the sales, then you can invest more and you can make scope bigger, right? It's better to start small and then make it larger than the other way around. So how to start with it, right? Because it's not only the whole process, the whole philosophy of developing with community starts before even early access, way earlier. The way we started our first board game is we had one art, and that's it, and general idea. And we started using Facebook ads just to see whether people will like that art. It was back then where we didn't even knew whether we can or make a game that would be interesting to people at all. We were super young. It was like 6 years back. And you don't know, you're young, you don't know. This is your dream, you want to make a game, but you don't know if you can make it, if people will think that what you're doing is worth your time, or and for us, that was the easiest way to just okay, let's just show this art, put it on the marketing, and we're talking about $100. Everyone can spend it, and then you can actually see whether people will comment it, whether they will be engaged, whether they will click, whether they will leave your email, and from the get-go, you can see different teams, how much people are interested in this team, in this general idea. It can be like a super easy pitch, right? Real-time strategy with whatever aliens and cows, and you can see maybe it will bite or not, right? But it's much better to find out whether your idea is cool, when you have one art, than once you spend 5 million zlotys on it, for example, right? So obviously, so that's why I would even start it on the super base idea. We have one art, we have whatever. We just put it on Facebook, see what people think. Again, don't worry about big announcement, because for majority of us mere mortals, no one cares. And then you can build from that. You can test 3 different ideas and pick one out of it, for example, right? Or if you committed even to one, sure, that's great. It is super good to have like this creative vision. That's also very, very strong, and I really respect that. But it's also good to see whether it makes sense in the kind of like a business matter. And as I said before, perfectionism, whether you're working alone or with a team, this is the biggest problem always, especially with artists. Artists are the worst. They will never let you show their works before they are, 100% finished, and so forth and so forth. And the thing is that, it will be important for artists, but for like 90% of your customers, they will not even spot a difference. For me, this discovery was when we started as a miniature painting studio. We were painting miniature Warhammer models, and we have 4 tiers of quality of painting. One tier was about $50 per miniature, and the highest tier was like $3,000 per one miniature, because it was like 5 hours of painter's time versus 200 hours. And we once did a test on Facebook and showed 2 models next to each other and asked community which one looks better, and it was like 60-40 to the $3,000 ones. Why? Because most people in the world aren't artists. They don't care, and they will spend like 5 seconds looking at this art, more or less, right? So kind of learning that and learning to think that, okay, there's probably not a single other person in the world that will care about those details as much as I do. That's the actual reason. And having this mentality of showing imperfect things, I think is crucial in here, right? Because we're just showing work in progress. And actually, what I found interesting is that people like to see the journey. It is interesting to them, because they have seen finished products so many times, but seeing how this evolved and maybe them being a part of the journey, commenting and seeing some of their comments implemented, is actually much better, because now they are emotionally invested in your product, right? They were a part of this journey. They see in this, this ugly-looking game getting much, much prettier. The gameplay that was rough and unpolished, getting to a place where it's really good. So not only you get early information, but you also get community behind it that feels, that this game is more important to them than, just the purchase. They were a part of this process. They have seen it grow. And it's, it's also cool for you as a creator. It's much better for you as a creator. We'll get to that. So I talked a little bit about this team and general premise, how to do the marketing. So then obviously what you would like to look is actions, right? So you can look for comments on like a general direction, but obviously you need to look at what clicks, right? So you're looking at clicks. You're setting up, for example, like a simple email list where you gather emails, so you can see how much emails there are getting from it. And in general, based on that, you can see, what are the pros and cons. And the worst case scenario for you when you are showing your crowdfunding, because people are usually afraid about negativity, right? Negative comments and so forth. That's actually not the worst. The worst is nothing. That's what I learned. If you're sharing your picture and there's like nothing, no comments, no likes, no angry faces, just nothing, that's the worst. If you get some negative comments, then okay, so I tackled something, I tackled it in a wrong way, but at least I can see, like what did I wrong or whatever, right? So this is super important to kind of try to read this feedback in well. If you are a company that already have a community, right? So you already are established, you made a game or 2 or whatever, then you can actually go a step further, and you can not only show things, but you can from the ground up involve people in the decision-making polls. For example, we're designing, I'll show you actually an example because I have it here. So we're making a follow-up to our Tainted Grail board game. By the way, great game, buy it. Now, okay, so those are the kind of like 4 design choices that we did for people to vote. We gave them a little bit of background of the character, right? And we give them the voice, okay? So we have 4 different designs. We feel comfortable with each of them. We think that every of the design is looking good. We are committed to it. This is our creative vision. Whatever you will pick, we'll be happy with it, right? And we make a poll, and then the people vote. And then based on that, actually, this design will be mastered as a beautiful art and created a miniature of it. And the people who took part in this process will actually be, involved in it. They actually made a change. There is a bit negative side of it, because the negative side of it, there are people who really wanted this model to happen, right? And they will be super not happy that this model happens. And then you can make an expansion that will, make this model purchasable for extra money, right? So, no, I'm obviously kidding. I mean, we're doing that because we're doing alternative models, but people actually don't mind it, right? Because it's only cosmetic. So it's not forced with the gameplay. Just to mention very quickly, right? There will be also people who will be, because this is a good fresh example. I made that poll, I think Friday, and there were a lot of people who were like, "Oh, none of those designs are looking good, right?" Or this is not the theme of Tainted Grail because it is too grotesque or whatnot. And this is basically part of the deal. This is internet. You will get negativity. That's it. You need to kind of be prepared for that. Whenever you're working with community, even if this is the most loving community, there will come a time when they will hate you. 100%, always. So you need to be prepared for that and kind of try to read in the feedback as for what are actually people seeing. And remember that probably around, okay, so this is like my statistics that are not confirmed by anything, but probably like 80% of people doesn't comment on the internet. That's what I would say more or less. And yeah, so this is what we did, and we're actually continuing with it. And what is pretty great about it is that from the very step is, people are feeling more involved. And I think that if we were sitting in here, if I would ask you like, which one do you like the most, then you feel like more interested in this design, then I would just show you like, this is the final design, right? This is just like, we as human, this is how we work. We like to be asked about our opinion. We love to have an opinion about everything, even if we don't know a single thing about it. We love to have an opinion. And, engaging those people in those opinions, that's really cool, because it's not only it's more interesting, because we did a lot of different, for example, ads or content that would be organic content. And whenever we would just show something, okay, people can appreciate it, be excited. But whenever we would ask about opinion, it's like 10 times more comments. People, are much more engaged, much more interested in whatever is happening. And with this, you get kind of like early adopters, what I call it. So people who are super obsessed about the game. This is the game they were waiting for their whole life. They are super engaged in it, and they will be your kind of crowd on the early access or whatever alpha you're gonna have or whatever beta you're gonna have. Okay, I just written them with a C. Sorry, my autocorrect didn't catch it up. Or it was late when I was making the presentation, so apologies for all the mistakes on it. Anyway, going back to the topic. Yeah, so with those early adopters, we actually can get people who will buy your early access, because majority of the people does not buy early access, because why would you want to buy a game that is not finished? So it is different groups of people. Those are usually the final consumers are different group than people who buy early accesses. And so you don't need to worry that much that the game will be burned on the early access, because a lot of people will not even touch early accesses. Media will not touch early accesses because too much of the early accesses were abandoned or whatnot, right? So it's definitely something that that is only for the early adopters, people who want to be involved in a project, who want to give you feedback, who are really engaged in this game that you're making. And you can obviously communicate with them, ask them for their opinion, and show them the game, make them play the game. You can have some basic analytics. You can see what they're doing. And one thing that is super important here is how to interpret feedback, because there are years of experience of reading feedback. Just to give you a quick example, it can vary from nation to nation. For Americans, amazing game is like from 5 to 10. That's amazing game for them. For Germans, they will say like, yeah, it's okay, and then they will write it like 9 out of 10. I've did like a lot of fairs on the board games, and the range of communication is like super weird. So nationwide is very hard to interpret. But the strongest indicator for me always have been and continue to be, do people play the game? That's the most important one, basically. Because they can write you, oh, the game is unbalanced, oh, the models are shitty or whatever. But if they play it on average 5 hours, then you got something awesome, right? Because at the end of the day, this is what you're looking for, people playing it. And the game is a package of different things. And whether the game is good in the perception, this is the balance of all the bad things that the game have and all the good things that the game have. It's not that good game is like everything is good. It's just a like mixed bag. And there are a lot of examples of games that have cardinal mistakes. A mistake that if you would do in a game, everyone would tell you, oh, this will kill your game. But they had this one amazing thing. And this one amazing thing made the game worth it. And they found it, and they made it work, and everything else didn't matter. Oop. Okay. Oops. Okay, we're going back. Good. All right. So from my experience, okay. So we have where can we actually launch early access, right? So what can people forgive you and what they will not forgive you? Most important key gameplay loop. You need to know more or less what the game is. Is it a strategy, turn-based, shooter? And to have this idea like what the game loop looks like on the large scale and on the small scale. So we're talking both about moment-to-moment gameplay. So like every minute, what decision am I making? And in a large scale, like what is my purpose as a player? How am I rewarded for the victory or whatnot, right? And like at the end of the day, game is like choice. So this is basically what a game is. It's just a series of choices. What I'm choosing and how I decide to choosing. So having this key gameplay loop, which is also like a game idea, is the crucial thing. The second thing is people are very picky about forgiving you game-breaking bugs or like super bad optimization or crashes. They will just like give you a bad review for that. So having bugs is kind of okay to a level, but not bugs that prevent you from actual playing, or worse, if you play and you're engaged, you're starting having fun, and crash, your game doesn't work. This is the worst probably, and kind of guarantees you some amount of negative reviews. Basic audio and visuals, again, it is good to have some. It doesn't have to be perfect. I would even say that it's better to have something creative than polished, right? So you can actually have models that are undone, but have like a good shape or good idea behind them, and then you can work from them, from that. Obviously, balance is good to have some form, especially if you're in a multiplayer. That's almost a must. Good communication. So if you're actually going, that's important thing. People will really see through you whether you're using early access as a, like a pre-order mechanism or whatever, or are you actually engaged and invested in working with community? And if you will be, and you will honestly, gather feedback and implement it, they will reward you for that. So a good communication, meaning that we are doing regular updates, for example, once a month or 2 months. We're showing what we're working on. We're saying like, okay, those were your ideas. We're trying to implement it. Or sometimes we'll just disagree. Okay, those were my ideas. We don't think that they are good. This is why. And it is super important to kind of have this kind of dialogue. I would say from my experience that on Kickstarter it was more intense, so board gamers were more involved. On Steam, I would say it is less personal to some extent, but still directing people to Discord and then having this kind of like a conversation one-to-one, not on like Steam updates, is for us it was like a go-to. So the Discord server, dedicated Discord server where people can feedback, comment on ideas, and then on Discord you can share your concept art, show models and things like that. One super crucial idea is why buy now? Possibly when you have your Steam page of early access, this is the most crucial point, meaning you have a customer, and what we promise this customer, you're getting unfinished product that potentially have bugs and that will be changing, and you probably lost all your saves once we'll be done with the game, right? So there's an important reason. You need to give this person an important reason why you should buy this early access. And this reason can be, half the price, or this reason can be you get some exclusive item in game, right, or some status or whatnot. If you have a really good game, multiplayer most of the time, then the reason might be you get to play it. But it needs to be a really good game. For a lot of things, it's good to have it's good to have some good call to action, whether price reduction and so forth. But the cool thing is that if you sold anything on Steam, and early access is mostly for Steam, you have this kind of like, when you do like a traditional publishing, you start with a full price, then you get 20% discount, you sell a bit more copies, then a few months pass, you do like 50% discount, sell more copies, blah, blah, blah. So you have this kind of like lifetime of product, 2 years, right? But if you do early access, you can actually start from the other side, meaning that you can start like, okay, so the game is for $5, but in half a year it will be $10, and then after half a year it will be $20. And you'll be selling a lot of copies on those $5 mark, which also makes sense because you're actually giving people the most unfinished early access. Then it's more finished, so the price go up. And then you can start the cycle again once you're at the full price at the release. You can still go, with the discounts and kind of continue to sell more copies. And it's also an interesting strategy to get. One thing for the early access is that the quality of the early access game is getting higher, so do the expectation of people. So people used to forgive you much more. Right now, they will expect something that works and looks half good, and have the have a core idea working that is fun, right? And one thing that again is one thing that is most important and that can be forgiven above all else is that if your game is actually really fun, the graphic will not matter and the rest will not matter. This is the example of audience building of Tainted Grail Conquest, so the game that we did on the early access. We had the advantage of first having a board game. So we already had some kind of crowd interested. But then on top of it, we launched an early access. Even before early access, we had like a closed beta for reviewers where so here, it was a campaign game with cards So it was like a story campaign game where whenever you would be fighting with cards, right? And then we sent it to kind of YouTubers, influencers, and they said, okay, because we had the whole environment and travel was in 3D, and then the fight would be 2D cards because cheaper, right? And then the influencers said like, oh yeah, this is a really cool game, story is great, whatnot. But it is a card game because everything is in 2D, so we don't really want to play it. And then I feel like, okay, so we're doing 3D combat. So we actually changed the whole concept and made a 3D combat. And once we did a 3D combat, we felt like, actually, if we have a really good 3D combat and really good fighting mechanics right now, maybe it will be better to do a roguelike because Slay the Spire sold a lot of copies. And we kind of pitched it out, and people liked it because it was a roguelike with a lot of story. It was non-linear. You got new cards, new rewards. It actually worked just better with the cards. So we launched early access of Tainted Grail Conquest. This is when we kind of showed our first concept. It was when we made it available for a vast amount of players first time, and it was early access of Conquest. And you can see that gradually we had the rise of wishlist, and then we started early access. So for a week or so, we were in the popular upcoming. From my experience, to be in the popular upcoming, you have to have like 10,000 plus wishlist, more or less. And it gives you actually a big boost on the kind of like organic searches in Steam, because you like essentially are on the main page of Steam. And then it gradually go up. We had our ups and downs. We were doing regular updates. We were doing regular communication with people. We find out that whenever we did like an update with a discount and with some influencer support, it actually had the best effect. And then we did a release, and the release was very successful. We're very happy with it. Also, recognizability went a lot. After release, we did, so this spike here was language additions added, again, another boost of recognizability and so forth. And the cool thing with games is that the games, digital games, have like a really long tail. And if you, only good games, but if you have a game that have good reviews, people enjoy them, they continue to be rediscovered by people, and CD Projekt sells Witcher 3 for how many years so successfully, right? And sometimes it's worth to go through this process, try to get the best game that you can, get feedback from people, balance it out. For us here, Conquest, it will be probably impossible to balance this game correctly, because we had 500 different cards combined with 200 different passive abilities combined with 100 consumables, and like we would need like a probably division of 20 game developers to balance it correctly. But then we put a simple analytics on it, and then we see, okay, so if someone is using this card and have 77% win ratio, okay, Banhammer, easy, right? And it was so much easier to balance the game with a mass. And people were actually, and it was also cool for people because they were like, oh, you killed my favorite card, now I have to find different strategy. And sometimes they were angry, sometimes they were happy. But again, it was a journey, and it was actually fun for them to rediscover the game, to see different strategies and so forth. So for us, this was the journey, and on the early access. And at the end of the day, as you can see, the early access period didn't take the momentum from the actual release. It was not like people were like, oh yeah, this game was on early access for a year, so I don't care anymore because it was. No, for us, actually, this was the point where majority of people actually discovered it, when majority of the influencers would play it, because again, the influencers would not play early access only if it would be like super successful. But normally if you'll reach out to influencers, say to them, hey, we have an early access game, maybe you want to try it, and they'll be like, no. Yeah, once it will be finished, maybe, right? Or you can pay them, then they will play it. But generally, this was for us quite interesting. So the biggest positive of the whole process, from my perspective, early concept verification, we already talked about it. Big team motivation. This is something that I haven't talked, and I think that is crucial. Because if I would say one thing that is most tiring about our industry making games, is that you work on something, sometimes 2 or 3 years, that you do not see an effect. And it can literally destroy your mental health, just to not be able to see your work being put into something. There are some psychologist studies that show that the most happy people are bricklayers, because they can actually see almost immediately the effect of their work, right? In game dev, and I heard it from a lot of people on especially AAA games that can be in development for 5 years, 6 years, and they cannot even talk about it. They cannot show anything that they are working on because it is top secret, and it's super hard because you cannot show it. People do not comment on it. You don't have the feedback loop. You don't know whether what you're working on has any potential or not. But if you actually, do early access, you get it. The people are actually, first they are super motivated to close whatever build you're doing, and this is always kind of like a magical period. Like whoever finished a game is always magical because, the last month everyone is doing miracles. Nothing was working, suddenly it is working, game is looking twice better. So the last month is actually where the magic happens and when everyone is the most motivated to actually make it. So you actually get it a bit earlier, and then people can actually see the effect of their work. It is, the both a sword, because on the other hand, if the early access will be really bad, reviews will be really bad, obviously your team will be demotivated. But to be honest, it's probably better to know that earlier, and for example, cut the project loose than later. Then obviously we have a much longer period of data collection and community gathering, and we get marketing second chance, because now when we will be making full release, I can much better plan my marketing strategy. What is my audience? Who does this game resonate with, right? What is the amount of money that I have to pay for a click, and what are the best campaigns that are converted to purchases, meaning on like Facebook displays or whatnot. And I can have all those informations, and when the big release day comes, I can much better plan my budget and I can spend it in much sensible way. Obviously involving community, making them part of the journey, which make them more invested. And it is actually super, oh, thank you. Nice. And actually involving them into the product in the board game category is actually, it's super interesting situation, because we have, there's like the biggest portal for board games, the Board Game Geek, and there's like hotness, so which is what are the games that are most talked about, and 75% of them are crowdfunded games. It's not that traditional publishers stop making games. No, people are more excited, more hyped about the projects that they are, involved in. And obviously, they're balancing bug fixing before full release. Negatives. So yeah, community can be toxic. Yeah, that's internet. Unfortunately, it happens. It can be bad, but at the end of the day, it is just comments. So yeah, we're big boys, so we can live through it, I think. Feedback is often hard to interpret. That's also important, because as I said, sometimes people will say the game is bad. But my favorite Steam review that we got for No Place Like Home, which was a game when we got the review, was sold for $5. And the guy had 176 hours of played time and said like, after 100-hour game becomes boring, and he gave us a negative. So I was like, oh yeah, thank you, yeah, that's awesome. The first thing is, okay, so we're showing something that is unfinished, right? So there's a big risk of actually getting negative reviews. If we'll get a lot of negative reviews, then on the release day, if you have like a mixed reviews, hard to sell because those reviews will stick with you. So hopefully by the time of release, if you do a good job, you can go out of those mixed reviews, especially that, if you will do a good job, during the whole early access, you will sell maybe 20% of your first week of full release with marketing support. So even if the reviews will be mixed somehow, then you can kind of like, if the release is good, release build is good, people are happy, then very, very fast the reviews will go back. And also safe wipes and big pivots in the game design. This is super problematic very often if you have a game with say games or roguelike. And so very often you will need to change something so drastic that it's almost impossible to keep the save files, or your team would have to work additional month or what to keep the save files. So it's very good to just be very upfront about it and to say to everyone that just expect that at some point your saves will be just wiped and you'll have to start from anew. And most people will be fine with it. So that should be okay, but to some extent it's hard. And that's it. Thank you very much for the presentation. Definitely. And we have a time for questions, or? Awesome, great. So I'll take questions now.
Oh, okay. So are there like any mistakes related to early access, like things that you did but you wish you did them differently? Or
how many hours do we have?
What was the biggest one?
Let me think a little bit. Yeah, we did one. So with No Place Like Home, we did an early access, and we had good reviews on like a base mechanics. And we promised like double the content, but we thought like, the results are good. So what we'll do, we'll actually redesign all the mechanics to be better. Mm-hmm. And we spent, so just adding twice the content would be like probably 3 months. We spent like 9 months of redesigning everything. And we published the version, and actually people are, actually I enjoyed the previous version better. So this was like, we added 6 months of development to make worse game.
Maybe did you revert, or did you stay with the newer version?
Yeah, I mean, no, it's actually, okay, so we stayed with the new version. Yeah. It's too late to revert. It was, in many instances, it was much better because it was like better optimized. Like new people coming in who didn't knew the previous version actually didn't mind, but all the people who knew the older version actually, were like, oh yeah, the watering of flowers were better, right? So that's something that, but we actually, it was our fault, not because we made the decision, because the way we make it, we didn't communicate it. We just worked on it 6 months, and then we should like, oh, here's the patch, super excited about it, but we actually, didn't talk with people beforehand, and so once people were super surprised. And second, we actually didn't stay connected to our old values, where it was like, let's first ask the community before we'll commit a lot of resources to doing something.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. I want to ask you, do you create additional content before you start Kickstart project? I mean additional miniatures, cards, mm-hmm. Game elements, or it depends on how the Kickstart project goes?
Sure. For our project, we kind of got very good at estimating things based on the initial following or how marketing works. So basically, after, I don't know, let's say like first hour of the campaign, I more or less can say like what will be the end result, because we did so many of them, right? For digital, we're trying to get it. So our benchmark is usually what we do is we're like half of the content is prepared, half of the content we develop during the with community during the campaign, right? So I think that it's a pretty healthy balance. You need to have, for the board games, right? So for the board games, you need to have a good working core box. And it's also the hardest thing to do, the core box is usually, because it's like a gameplay skeleton of a game. And then you can make a different innovative expansion based on what people say. And it's actually super cool, because there are a lot of cool ideas that we wouldn't have thought about it. So those expansions are usually very creative. The one thing that is actually a negative and also a big risk is that, especially with a Kickstarter, early access not so much. In the Kickstarter, you can overpromise very easily. So you can say like, oh, we'll make, this is awesome idea, we'll make it. And then turns out that it's like a lot harder than it seems to. But you still need to deliver because you promised it, right? So yeah, there is a risk to that, but like overall, usually it's super cool. And also, people doesn't mind if you change it and it will end up being good, right? So even if my experience, even if you'll promise that this expansion will work like this, and then you will be open about it, listen guys, it doesn't work, it's not fun, this is how we'll make it, totally different, and they'll be like, sure, fine. As long as you're not trying to, like, you promise 5 miniatures, you're giving 1. So that's obviously a no-go zone, but otherwise people are okay.
Okay, thank you. Can I ask one more question? I've heard that while you have a Kickstarter project, you should already have at least 100 people that will donate in the first hour of your starting project. And what can you recommend to the small developer if one person works on the project and he has no big budget on this? What can you recommend?
Board games or digital games?
Board games.
Okay, so for board games, what I would do is find whatever the community is, meaning Facebook groups. So this is like a non-budget marketing. But okay, so if you will go into the game group or go to Reddit or whatever and be like, hey guys, this is my game, please follow it, they will kick you out of the group within 5 seconds, right? But if you will come like, hey guys, this is my story, I am developing this game, but I'm not sure about the cover art. Do you think A or B? What is better resonating with you? And then, oh, by the way, this is the link, right? Then it's fine, usually, most of the time, right? Obviously, the golden rule is if you want to be a part of some community, you should also bring some value. So you shouldn't be like, oh, this is my game and that's it, I'm out, right? But if you will come in and be like, listen, guys, I'm an early developer. This is what I learned, and this is my project. Most people will be fine because you're actually bringing value to the community. You told your story and so forth. So that. Surprisingly, Facebook advertising is it's super easy to set up, and you can even spend like $100, and sometimes it will be more than 10 hours of your own time, because for $100 you can reach out 20,000 people, for example, and directed board gamers or whatever, and just basically see how it is. And definitely, like in current environment, like 5 years ago, you would get organic movement on Kickstarter. Right now, there's so many projects that if you don't have built community, you start your project, no one cares, no one will back it. So,
Thank you.
Okay, so we have time for really, really short question.
Okay.
Yeah, okay.
I can stay
do you promise?
10 minutes longer.
Yeah, but we still have one more lecture after
Alright.
that, so...
Right, so thank you very much for the presentation. So how do you know that you've overstayed your early access?
Oh, that's a good question. You don't. No, but this is like one of the hardest thing is like when the game is finished. One of the hardest, like I think in the whole game development, this is one of the hardest, because whoever makes a game knows that the game is never finished. You just, put a line somewhere, right? I would probably say that, okay, so first of all, it depends on The sales. So you look at the sales. If the sale is going to almost zero or whatever, there's always this business decision of can I keep my team going or no, or so forth, right? But the second thing is I think that if you got 80% reviews, so very good reviews, right? And you have enough content for what your game is worth. So let's say you have $20 games, it should be probably like 20-25 hours at least of gameplay. If you have that, if you have positive reviews, I would say you're good to go, right? Because and also no game breaking bugs, good optimization. If you have those things, you're probably good to go, right? It's good to have full release without bugs and with good optimization, enough content to justify the price tag. And if you have good reviews, then you got everything you need.
Thank you.
Okay, guys, let's give a big round of applause for Marcin.